Well, that's Jasper's story, and I don't know what your story is, but maybe one of the next things by faith you need to do in your story is take that step of baptism. Baptism is for someone who's given their life to Jesus. Maybe that's your next step, to give your life to Jesus. That's the important step. But once you do that, Jesus asks us to be baptized. It's one of the first things you can do, just to say yes to Jesus and also to tell others, I'm with him now. I'm following him. So if that's you, I encourage you to do that. The next opportunity for baptism is Sunday, February 26th, right after the 11 a.m. service, so about 12:10. And if you go to the early service, which I'm going to guess that some of you do, I would encourage you to come back and see the baptism. Support those who are doing it, not just to applaud them, but I mean, what if we were a church that looked and we saw who was being baptized and we said, I'm going to follow up with them. I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to encourage them on the way. What I love about Jasper's story is he had several opportunities where he could have just said, nah. He signed up and he fell off the radar of a church. And that church's defense, it could happen. I don't know if this is breaking news. It may disappoint a few of you. Churches aren't perfect. We're not. But man, he was persistent. Oh, I'm a little bit older. Everyone else has already done it. Look, you're going to find a way, you're going to find an excuse. But you can't find both. And if God says, this is what I want you to do, find a way to say yes. And if this is your yes, go to the sign up and events on our website or app. You'll get, there's an interest form there. You'll fill that out, and you'll be sent an online baptism class that you can do on your own time that walks you through the ins and outs and helps you take your next step, and then we can help you the rest of the way. By faith, this might be the next step for you. And we're in this series about faith called Living in and Leaving a Legacy of Faith. We're talking about legacy. Legacy is what you leave behind after you're gone, after you leave the room or leave this life. It's the reputation, the influence, the impact. But we're also focusing on leaning into the legacy that's gone before us. And to do that, we've been reading Hebrews chapter 11, this faith hall of fame. Because faith, I really believe this, that faith is your greatest asset in life. Whatever you're going through, whatever you will go through, I guarantee faith is the greatest asset. On the bad days, on the good days, and every day in between, faith is important. What is faith? Faith is confidence in what we hope for. Hope, not like I hope it doesn't rain. And assurance about what we do not see. It's a vision beyond visibility. I can't see it, but I believe it. And I believe it enough to step into it. And the rest of Hebrews 11, it says this is what the ancients were commended for. And then it goes on in 11:6, it says, and without faith, it's impossible to please God. Like faith is your greatest asset in life. And then we're given the ancients that were commended, these legacies of faith to lean into. And you know, when I say their names, some of them are pretty easy. You know, Noah was commended for the ark. Thank you. Yeah, you can talk out loud in church. Just don't do this conversation, but this way's okay right now. I'd be distracted with a lot of this going on, although I see you when you do. But yeah, someone's obviously Noah and the ark. God's not going to ask any of us to build an ark, but he's going to ask us to have the faith of Noah. The example was the ark. And then there was Abraham, and Abraham's got a couple of marquee moments of faith where, like, when the Hall of Fame selection committee was deciding who gets in the Faith Hall of Fame, in Hebrews 11, they're like, okay, with Noah, the ark. Okay, what else? Abraham, well, you got a couple. Could be when God said to leave everything you know and everything you have and go someplace that you're not sure where you're going, but I do, but you just have to trust me. Yeah, let's do that. Put that in there. What about the time when he had to sacrifice his son, who was the guarantee to the promise that he would have descendants, his only son? He had to sacrifice his only son and offer him up. And God said, yeah, let's put that in there too. Like the Holy Spirit said, you know, these are the moments of faith we're going to put in Hebrews 11. These are obvious moments. Then there's a guy named Joseph. Now, not the Joseph at the manger, but the Joseph in the Old Testament. And when I say Joseph, what comes to mind? Like what? Joseph and coat of many colors. Like he's not in the Hebrews 11 for being a fashionista either. Because that really wasn't his by faith moment. That was actually his dad's move. If you have your Bible, turn to Genesis 37. Because in Hebrews 11, what it singles out by faith Joseph, I've read this for years and gone, really? That's what you talk about with Joseph? Because his story's amazing. Genesis 37. His dad, Jacob, also known as Israel, birth of a nation, he gives his son a coat of many colors because he likes him. Problem is he had other kids. Like, whenever they say, hey, let's mess with dad. Hey, which one of your sons do you love best? Joseph. Oh, man, that did not go the way I thought. So imagine, so the brothers were resentful of their younger brother, Joseph. And he's walking around with a billboard that dad likes me best with this coat. And to make it worse, Joseph has this dream, and he goes to his older brothers. I'm an only child. That's not breaking news if you know me, but like if for those who have siblings, imagine how this would play. Hey, I had a dream a couple of times that all of you who are older than me, my older siblings, are going to bow down to me, and I'm going to be the boss of you. They would go, oh, Joseph, you're little guy. Like, no, it was resentful. It was so resentful that one day when he's kind of doing Uber Eats and taking them a lunch while they're out doing the sheep, they see him coming and they go, man, I really don't like our younger brother Joseph. Let's kill him. So, again, I'm an only child. The sibling rivalry is foreign to me, but that seems a bit severe. Hey, let's kill him. And then Reuben, one of his brothers, goes, no. He has compassion on Joseph. No, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him. So they trafficked Joseph. They sold him into slavery. Now, I don't know how bad your sibling rivalry is, but if they're having the conversation, so we sell him or kill him, sell him or kill him, that's pretty bad. They decide to sell him. He's sold as a slave. They take his coat of many colors, they put a bunch of blood on it from an animal, take it back to their dad and say, hey, Dad, your son is dead. And he weeps. And they just kind of keep this secret to themselves. And they think they've gotten rid of him. I mean, nowhere along the way do we hear what Joseph is thinking. What would you be thinking? How would you be feeling? You're sold into slavery. Not once, but what we read, meanwhile, after that happens, he's sold to the Midianites, and the Midianites resell him, so he's already devalued because I already drove him off the lot, and now he's secondhand owner. Sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar. So now he's been a slave twice. It's gone from bad to worse, but he's the slave to one of those right-hand man of Pharaoh, Potiphar, the captain of the guard. This is the guy in charge of protecting Pharaoh, a pretty important guy. And Joseph is now serving with him. And again, we don't get any words of Joseph in this situation. What he's thinking, I know what I'd be thinking. Or what I don't know what I'd do. But here's what it says. The commentary in Genesis 38, it kind of has a side story. And then Genesis 39, it picks up. He's serving as a slave. The Lord was with Joseph. He's twice been a slave, sold by his brothers, abandoned from his family in a foreign country. Bet he didn't feel like it. And there's times where you're not going to feel like the Lord's with you, but the Lord was with Joseph. So much so that he prospered. I mean, not so much that he wasn't a slave, but it was going well for him where he was. He lived in the house of an Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, his faith was evident to others. They're like, there's something about you. And it doesn't say like that. It says when he saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord was giving him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant, like his right-hand man. Potiphar put him in charge of his whole household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. To a slave, a foreigner. Joseph, I trust you with everything. Joseph never just bottomed out and said, I give up. Because he believed that the Lord was with him. He believed it so much because faith was his greatest asset. Then one day, Potiphar's wife starts hitting on him. And Joseph refuses, and she hits on him, and he refuses. Now, we can give him a lot of credit for that, but just, we also don't know what she looked like. So, I mean, I'm just saying. But still, gosh, I'm so sorry. If you have a complaint, just email me at mark.porter@live-link.org. He said no. And then she turns around and says, do you know what your servant Joseph did to her husband? She makes up a story. And here's the reality for most of us. And the more, it's true for all of us. You're not just one action away from your life coming unraveled. You're one accusation away. And an accusation that was wrong against Joseph, who the Lord was with, led to this. When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. One accusation. But the Lord was with him. And there's a lesson here too, because if you feel like and this is a lesson I've learned several times, when you think you've hit rock bottom, I promise you there's a few floors more. Never just say, well, it can only go up from here. That's not always true. Joseph, I was sold a slave. It couldn't get worse. Well, now he's a prisoner who's falsely accused in a foreign land. Like, who would take his word for it? Who's going to come to his defense? He could be in prison for a long time. And he was. Like at least 4 years, probably closer to 10. He is put in prison. But he makes a friend while he's in prison. While Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. Says it again. It's a recurring theme in the story. God showed him kindness, granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Like, I hope I'm never in a situation where I go, I hope the prison warden has favor on me. Like that's a rough spot to be. But that was an advantage there. Why did the prison warden give him favor? Because the Lord was with Joseph. Faith is your greatest asset. Believing that God is with you when circumstances would tell you that he's not. So the warden put Joseph in charge. Joseph was a leader. Everyone's always putting him in charge of stuff. Of all those held in prison. Basically, he was the warden's overseer of the prisoners. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Let me ask you this. How would your outlook on life change if you really believed that God was with you? It's the most frequently given promise in the Bible. It wasn't just given to Joseph. It was given to you as well. And the same God, like we sang about earlier, the same God that was with Joseph is the same God that's with you. What if you really believe that? How would your outlook on situations change? How would your interactions with others change? Joseph really believed that. And he never forgot that the Lord was with him. At least that we're not told that he was. And as he's in prison in Genesis 40, you read this, and I'm giving you a tour. And if you do the Bible reading plan at Live Oak, which I hope you do, especially this week, you're going to read all of Joseph's story. And in Genesis 40, he's in prison, and these two guys are sent in they were right-hand guys. The king's prisoners are kept in this prison, right? So it was the cupbearer, the guy that would hand him the drink and go, yep, it's not poison. See, I'm still alive. That guy, pretty good gig till you have a bad day at the office, like then it's your last day at the office. That guy, and then the baker. The candlestick maker, we don't know what happened to him, but the cupbearer and the baker were in prison. And one day, they both had dreams that upset them. And Joseph, and this is so important, this is why compassion is an open door that could lead to ministry opportunities, to investing in others, helping others. He looks at him and he goes, why are you so sad? Why are you so sad? If we just paid attention to people's emotional state, how great could it be for us to join them and walk them through something? So they go, we had these dreams and we don't know what it means. And Joseph says, well, God knows. Tell me. Let's see if we can figure it out. Because he didn't say it, but he could have dropped the Lord's with me card, but he didn't. But he said, God knows. Why don't you just tell me? So they tell him the dreams. And one has a dream, and he says this, and you can read about it. One has another dream, it's this. And Joseph goes, oh, okay. So he goes to the cupbearer, and he goes, in 3 days, you're going to get your old job back. And you're going to be serving the king again. You're going to get out of here. And he says, when you do, please remember me. Shouldn't be here. And not just in the prison, I shouldn't be in this country. He tells him his story. He goes, yeah, I'll remember you. And the baker goes, ooh, that's great. What's my dream? And he goes, oh, in 3 days, you're going to be hung by the king and killed. He goes, I want his dream. So anyway, dreams come true. It's exactly as Joseph said. The baker is hung. The cupbearer is restored. All in the same, at Pharaoh's birthday party. I guess he wanted to hang the guy at his birthday. It's a weird deal, but it happened, just like Joseph said, as God helped Joseph interpret the dreams. So here's the cupbearer. Now he's in a place right next to Pharaoh. He can do what he promised that he would do. He'd say, Joseph, there's this guy in prison. Pharaoh, Joseph, you need to know Joseph. He helped me interpret a dream and it came true. Like, this is a trusted guy. Instead, this is what happened. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Joseph can't catch a break. But the Lord was with him, and that's why he was able to sustain through all of this. He was forgotten by the cupbearer. Joseph was forgotten by others, but he was never forgotten by God. He believed that to be true. I really do. Because everything it tells us, the Lord is with him, the Lord is with him, the Lord is with him. I don't think that was a narrator like Morgan Freeman telling us in the background. I think Joseph really believed this. He was forgotten by others, but he was never forgotten by God. And Joseph never forgot God or his promises. He kept leaning into him. Even when it was served him well to play his own card and say, this is about me. They could get him out of something. Because the next person has a dream we heard about in Genesis 41 is Pharaoh. Pharaoh has this dream, and he wakes up, and he's having a bad dream. And by the way, this is like 2 years have passed since the cupbearer was released. So it wasn't like next week the guy goes, oh yeah, I forgot. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. Can't figure it out. And he tells the cupbearer, and all of a sudden the cupbearer goes, well, this is awkward. I'm just now reminded, and it actually says that. He goes, I'm just now remembering there was this guy when I was in prison. You remember when you put me in prison? He goes, there was a guy, interpret the dream that came true that I would be back in 3 days, and I was. You need to talk to him. So they send for Joseph. And Joseph is brought into Pharaoh, and this is Joseph's chance. He's a dream interpreter. He can do this. And Pharaoh says, can you interpret the dream? I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And Joseph says, I cannot. I would have said, sure, you bet I can. Or how about, I'll tell you if you release me. All he does is this. I cannot do it, but God can. God will give the Pharaoh the answer he desires. And he'll tell him exactly what the dream means. Pharaoh hears this. He goes, lay it on me. So Pharaoh tells him about the dream. Joseph goes, I know exactly what this is. There's going to be a time of prosperity. Then there's going to be a time of great famine that's going to impact Egypt and the whole world. So here's what you got to do. You need to spend the next 7 years storing up all you can. And then you're in a place not just take care of yourself, but take care of others and be in a place where everyone's coming to you. So he tells Pharaoh the plan. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom this is the Spirit of God? Faith is your greatest asset. It's noticeable to others, and it benefits others. Like, any one of these moments could have been the Hebrews 11 selection committee could have said, well, let's put in when he was in prison. He survived prison. Like, it's Shawshank, but better. Like, God was with him and crazy twists and turns. And then he gets out and he's helping Pharaoh. He could have said, let's do the tragic story of being sold into slavery. Let's do the tragic story of this, but Joseph's resilient faith. All these moments could have been selected. None of them were mentioned in Hebrews 11. But this guy has something different, and Pharaoh notices it. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace. This is the third time Joseph's been in charge of a place like that's not even his home. It's like there's just something about his faith and his willingness to not make it about himself. Can you interpret the dream? Nope, but God can. That's the kind of person we want. You make it about God and others, we want you all day long. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. He's the number 2 guy. He's, again, like how in the world is this happening? Because the Lord was with him, and he lived like it's true. And he followed that all the way, every day. That's how he lived. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. A little just throwaway sentence. He was 17 when he was sold into slavery. That's a long time away from home. Joseph had some stories to tell about being sold as a slave twice, wrongly accused, in prison, forgotten in prison for multiple years. Interpreting a dream for a guy that helped get him out of prison, but after he forgot him for 2 years. Interpreting a dream for Pharaoh that got him to be the number 2 guy in the Pharaoh's kingdom. 30 years old. That last 17 years could have been something that made him bitter, but somehow his faith just kept growing. Then it says this: when all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. And Pharaoh had an answer because he listened to Joseph. And Joseph had an answer because he listened to God. It all comes back to Joseph's faith. Go to Joseph. Do what he tells you. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. And guess who came looking for food? His brothers. They show up in Egypt. And if I were writing the movie, I would say, and here they come. All right, brothers, have I got something for you? And you know what he gives them? Food. They don't recognize him. And there's a couple chapters there, he messes with his brothers a little bit, and he gives them food and sends them home, and he plays a little trick within there, and he kind of makes them afraid for a minute. Then he says, hey, bring back my younger brother. Bring my dad. He's doing all these things. And finally, they go back with the food. They come back again. And when they come back, one day, Joseph finally says, okay, enough of this. I may look like an Egyptian and walk like an Egyptian and talk like an Egyptian, but I'm not an Egyptian. He makes himself known to his brothers. He says this: I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him. Why? Because they were terrified at his presence. Yeah. You think about that? Like, this was like a, please don't tell dad moment, like we broke a lamp. This was a, hey, please don't tell dad we sold you into slavery. Like, holy cow. And please don't tell dad that we told him you were dead and now you're alive and I'm not sure how we're going to get out of this one. Joseph says to his brothers, come closer to me. Oh, man, if this was a movie, he would be about to give it to him. When they had done all this, he said, I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. Here's why he wasn't mad. Because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. You didn't send me here. God sent me here. You think the person that's wronging you right now is in charge of your story. They're not. God is in charge of your story. And God is with you in the worst parts of your story, even when it feels like it doesn't. Even when someone makes a decision that sends you to a bad place, like being sold as a slave and sold as a slave again, and then wrongly accused and put in prison, forgotten in prison. He had every reason to believe you guys did this and grow bitter. He didn't. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there'll be no plowing and reaping. It's not going to get better for a while. God sent me here. And God sent me here because God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth. This wasn't just about feeding my family or feeding some people, but God promised there would be a group of people, Abraham's descendants, that would become a nation, Israel. As in, he would say to his brothers, the name of our dad. He's preserving a group of people on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Because, if all of a sudden someone just dropped by and God just kind of put grain in their house, on their doorstep, they would have said, well, isn't that convenient? Isn't that great? This is an only God moment. Only God we could sell our brother to Egypt as a slave and go there one day, and he's the guy in charge of giving out grain, and he has every reason to say nope, and he says, here you go, because God's been doing this to protect you. Joseph didn't want his brothers to die. They're going to be the birth of a nation. And he's not bitter, but he could have missed it. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, like he's given Pharaoh's orders, Lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. You didn't do this. God did this. And then time passes. Joseph has all his brothers come, and they're moving to Egypt to take care of them. That's now their home. And then their father, Jacob, dies. And Joseph is older, and he's about to die. When Jacob died, the brothers were a little worried. Because remember when they said, first thing he said, when it's me, Joseph, he says, "My father's still alive?" So in the back of their minds, they might be thinking, if Dad wasn't alive, I think Joseph would have killed us. But he loves his dad. But now that Jacob has died, I think, are they worried now? Now Joseph's going to say, all right, I gave you your food, now you're going to pay. He's worried. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did him? Why would they think that? Because he has every right to. Why would they think that? Because that's what they would do. They would be, let's get him. None of them would have survived to get to a place of Joseph because they didn't have his faith. They didn't have his obedience to God or the compassion when there's no reason to. They ask a very good question. So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions. Yeah, okay. Hey, when Dad left, he said this, and I, it's like, did he really? Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. They're playing the dad card twice. Father God and our earthly father. When their message came to Joseph, he wept. He cried. He's like, I don't think like you. I don't believe like you. I'm not going to repay evil for evil. That's never been something God said what he wants us to do. And he lived by faith. And he says this, through tears. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? God will sort that out. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what's now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. I love this line. Man, what if we did this to our enemies? What if we did this to people we forgave? Because so often I forgive you. Really? Your words say one thing, but your face says another. Or your words say one thing, but your icy cold reception every time he sees you says another. He forgives them and he reassures them and spoke kindly to them. What if we did that to people who wronged us? Maybe this is what Joseph is singled out for, his forgiveness by faith. Joseph forgave his brothers. That's not the one. This is what he singled. This is his by faith moment. Think of everything so far. This is his by faith moment. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid, take you up out of this land and to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Think about this. They could have thought Joseph was the solution to all our problems. And because Joseph forgave us, Joseph was the solution to all our problems. Joseph never said it's about me. Pharaoh, I can't do your dream, but God can. People would notice the Lord was with him. Like it was never about him. And so as they're about to die, Joseph is looking forward saying, don't think it was me. It's the same God that was with me is the same God that can be with you. And Joseph made the Israelites, all of them, swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid And then here's this by faith moment. You must carry my bones up from this place. Really? Funeral instructions is his by faith moment? So Joseph died at an age of 110, and after they embalmed him, that's a good little fact because that helps us make us understand why having his body around for a while would make sense. They placed him in a coffin in Egypt. And by faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites. You're not going to be in Egypt forever. Right then, it was a pretty good place to be. Egypt was the only place to be where you could live because of Joseph, prepared for the famine. But things were going to get worse because they said, hey, Egypt, because you've been so kind to us, we're now your servants. Well, they took that literally, and it got worse and worse and worse until they were slaves in Egypt, and a different Pharaoh was in charge. And that was not a good place to be for this people of God. He spoke about the Exodus. We're going to leave here one day. And he gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. Why would his funeral arrangements be a by faith moment? Because he says, I believe this so much that we're going to leave here and make it to the promised land one day that God promised, that I don't want to be buried here. When you pack me with you. I'm not here, but I want a physical reminder for you that this is not our home. God has promised to take us someplace better. When you go, take me with you. In his dying moments, he had a faith that left a legacy and a very creepy, tangible reminder that we're not staying here. I don't think he was up on the mantle. I don't think he was like sitting in somebody's living room. I'm sure he was there. He was in a coffin. But I mean, that's basically he says, I believe it to my bones, literally, that I don't want my bones to be buried here. This is not our home. God promised it. And right now it seems like a good place to live. It's not going to feel that way. He had a faith looking forward. And faith was his greatest asset in his life. And his faith was an asset to others. Like everything in your life, it's not just for you, including your faith. Your faith can serve others. It served Potiphar. It served the prison warden. It served the cupbearer. I guess you could say it served the baker. I mean, at least he knew it was coming. It served Pharaoh. It served all of Egypt. It served all of the world. It served his brothers. It served his dad. It served his descendants who said, oh, there's Joseph. Why do we have a coffin in our living room as a coffee table? Because one day we're leaving here and Joseph wants us to go with him. We're going to go to the promised land one day. He believed it so much when he died that he didn't want to be buried here. That's how much he believed the promise. Can anybody look at anything in your life and say, I know they believe that promise because they have every reason not to, but they believe it to their bones. They live like it's true. And they point to others in a way that it's contagious. It's your greatest asset in life. And Joseph, remember, Joseph says, it's not about me. God will surely come to your aid. Our hope is never in somebody else or something else. It's in one person alone, the person of God. He will come to your aid. He said it twice. And then, years later, 400 years later, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. And what did they remember? He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones with you from this place. God's coming to help you. Take me with you. 400 years later, they still remembered it. And then they left, and then 4 or 5 decades later, and Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, so they're carrying his coffin around. And think about the conversations that must have happened. Hey, why again are we carrying Joseph? Like, why is this guy packed? Clearly, he doesn't need better weather, or it's not like no, because he believed the promise so much that he wanted to go with us. He wanted his body to go with us. We're buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. This became the inheritance of Joseph's descendants. The land did. Oh, the inheritance was so much more than the land. The inheritance was his faith. And there was a burial place. I don't know what his tombstone read, but it had the day he was born, the day he died. And his homes included, after he died, Egypt, all these places along the way, and finally here. Like, it was a monument to faith. Joseph believed this, and his kids didn't get to experience, and their kids didn't get to experience it, and their kids didn't get to experience it. And then their kids were slaves, and it was so horrible. And then their kids got to experience in the promised land, but not after their parents spent 40 years wandering around with a GPS thing, recalculating, because they just could not obey. And finally they're there, and they bring Joseph in. And he said, I believe it so much. He believed in God so much that he died. He believed it to his bones. Again, your faith is the greatest asset to you. Can it be an asset to others? Here's the legacy question this week. What would it look like for your faith to be the greatest asset in your life? To live by faith every day, every moment. What would that look like? And an asset for others. It's not just about you. Your asset can make the difference in somebody else's story. And that's what God wants to do. Joseph impacted so many stories along the way, and it happened with a lot of bad things happening and putting him in some very bad places. But if Joseph hadn't been sold as a slave, and if he hadn't been a slave in Egypt, and if he hadn't been in Egypt in prison, and he wouldn't have ever gotten that promotion into Pharaoh's house, that was the only path via LinkedIn. Like, there was no job application for Pharaoh's house. You had to know somebody. He had to meet that guy in prison who forgot about him for 2 years, but finally goes, oh yeah, I remember a guy. And God says, or Pharaoh says to him, can you do the dream? Nope, but God can. Doesn't play promote me card. He plays the God card, and God honors that. He gets promoted, saves his brothers, saves the world. But it all came from him going through some bad places. You might be where you are for a reason. But even if it's there, God says, I can bring reason out of this. I can bring purpose in this. By faith. It's the only way to live. Faith is your greatest asset, and it should impact others. How will it do that this week? What I love about Joseph's story in this is he's thinking next generation. Next generations, plural. Like 5 generations. Next Sunday for us is my 3rd favorite Sunday of the year. It's in the top 3. Sometimes it's my favorite that year. Christmas Eve is my favorite. I love Easter, because if Easter didn't happen, we shouldn't be meeting. I'll free up an hour or 2 every week for you, easy. But Next Gen Sunday is what we as a church say, we're going to, by faith, let our faith be an asset in the next generation, because we want to see them thrive. And we're going to do anything we can by faith. And so we talk about it, how we can do that every year in a different way. And I want to invite you to be here for that next week. It's one of my 3 favorite Sundays of the year. And I hope you'll be here, because it's a by faith Sunday. And we're going to look at some people by faith who did that. Again, is your faith your greatest asset? And is it an asset for others? It can be, and it should be. And I hope that it will be. God, thank you for Joseph's story. Of all the things they could have selected in Hebrews 11, I never understood why it was bury me somewhere else. I like that when I engage Scripture and engage with you, I see things I never saw before. I didn't understand before. God, thank you that Joseph, by faith, believed to his bones so much that he said, I want my bones to be buried to the place God promised that I'll never see, my kids will never see, my kids' kids will never see. He believed it for generations. And the ripple of his faith is still there today. The object of Joseph's faith was you. And you're the same God. So may we place our faith in you, follow you, and believe that you as well are with us, even when it feels like you're not. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us online. If you'd like to talk, I'll be down at the front.